Hello and welcome to Magic Gathering Strat. I'm Peyton. I'm here with another top 10 list for you guys, the top 10 cards from Journey into Nyx. The spoiler season for this set has just ended. Wizards finally spoiled it all last weekend, I believe, so we now know all 165 cards. There's some good stuff, as there is with every new set, and then there's the total horseshit cards that nobody wants to play, and this list will help differentiate between the two. I do apologize for there not being a video last week. That could not be helped. And this series will hopefully continue weekly with videos towards the end of the week with an article on Sunday, which includes the video. So be sure to check out the past top 10s if you have not, and let's launch into the preface, get down to the nitty gritty. Basically, I looked at the Mythic spoiler. There's a lot of cards there. I easily could have missed something. I'm human. I make mistakes. Totally let me know. I want to know what you guys think. Have I made sound decisions? Did I totally mess up everything? I will admit right now that I am not that big of a standard player. In fact, I don't really play standard at all. What I do know of the format comes from talking to my friends and people who do, know what's going on in the metagame, etc., etc. So I would love comments on how these cards are going to affect standard more as well, since I'm also looking at the perspective of how is this going to affect everything else in the game, every other format out there. If extended was still a sanctioned format, standard generally has a pretty decent effect on extended, but it's no longer a thing, so I can't look at that anymore. That makes me a bit sad, but anyways, yep. Also, I have not included a Johnny on the list. You either love him or you hate him. You probably like a Johnny if you like the whole heroic, let's put some +1/+1 counters theme, or you really, really wanted them to print a green-white planeswalker, finally. But either way, he's just not worth the spot on the list. He's gotten a lot of talk, and I think the general consensus is that he's a decent planeswalker. Also, there's only one god on the list. Otherwise, pretty much it would be top 5 non-god cards in Journey into Nyx, which is not a very exciting list. Actually, it may be top 6, because I'm not a biggest fan of Faraka. I don't think she does all that much for her mana cost. It's decent, but there's easily better god cards out there, as you will see as we delve further into the list, which god I have chosen to be the god for this list. And with that, let's take a look at the honorable mentions. First, we've got the temples. Temple of Epiphany and Temple of Malady was the other one. These cards are very good. They are going to have an effect on the metagame, as all the temples have. Now that we have all the temples, new decks get a little bit easier of a mana base. They have Scrylands for their mana base. Could change things up a bit, but pretty much everyone knew the temples were coming right from the start of the spoiler. I believe that the temples were spoiled very, very quickly, because basically Wizards doesn't really need to design some fancy new card. They already know what they're doing with the Scrylands. And there'll also be probably commonplace, so it's not like it's worth that big of a spot. The next two, Worst Fears and Bearer of the Heavens, have been talked about quite a bit. I just don't understand why. It's not like they're going to have that much of an impact on the metagame. Their CMC is too high, and even though we have some of the best ramp in Standard in quite a while, I mean, basically since Elves was a thing in Standard, there's not much you can do here to get these guys out that much faster. Bearer is like a 10/10 World Slayer. It's not that great. Worst Fears is a bad Mind Slaver. It's not that great. I don't see them making that much of an impact, but they are interesting and they are flavorful. That's basically it for honorable mentions. We'll take a look at number 10 on the list here. We've got a cool new sorcery called Spite of Mogis. I kind of like this one. The ability to nuke a big creature and then scry could be very good, potentially. The one thing that I'm not too happy about is it can't target players, and it's not an instant. If it were either one of these two things, it basically isn't a Lightning Axe. In some senses. Maybe not quite as good as Lightning Axe for the decks that do play Lightning Axe, but even so, it could act as an insane win condition if it could target players. Otherwise, it's just a decent creature kill spell. It could be like bolting a creature, it could be like What's a 4-mana burn spell? I don't know, it could be like fire blasting a creature. It just depends on how many instants or sorceries you have. And it's certainly better than Volcanic Hammer in any case. That card sucks. Alright, enough of that. Number 9, we've got Market Festival. I'm not too impressed by the green cards Wizards has printed in this set. Sure, you've got the new Hydras, that kind of stuff, the Hero's Bane and the Broodmaster, but they aren't incredibly game-breaking, and while they are flavorful and interesting, Market Festival will probably have a bigger effect. It makes those ramp decks all that much better. It can also fit more easily than a card like Overgrowth can in the multicolored ramp decks, and that's all it really is, as an Overgrowth that costs 1 more that lets you put colored mana into your pool. It helps fuel multicolored decks, and is a decent ramp spell, even if you do play it only on turn 4. Turn 3 with a Sylvan Caryatid or an Elvish Mystic, obviously. In the number 8 spot, we've got Mana Confluence. This one has also been talked about quite a bit, and it's another one of those that's going to enable all those multicolored decks to go and start doing more work. They've now got basically a City of Brass, the only difference being it's shut off by Angel of Jubilation, which doesn't make all that much of a difference, considering that not a lot of people are playing Angel of Jubilation, especially since it cycled out of Standard last season. Since Theros was released, at least. Haha. Really bad pun. Not even a pun. Anyways, Mana Confluence is essentially a functional City of Brass, and it could even worm its way into Legacy and stuff, where perhaps the deck really wanted to play 8 City of Brass. Well, there you go. There's your City of Brass. In the number 7 spot, we've got Dictate of Kruphix. I like this card. I'm not super partial to it. I like Kami of the Crescent Moon better, just because it comes down a turn earlier. But the strength of this card comes mainly from its flash. The ability to put it in play at your opponent's instep means you get to take advantage of extra draws before they do, whereas with the Kami, your opponent will get an extra draw before you get an extra draw. Either way, Kami is also slightly more fragile. It dies to a lightning bolt, whereas Dictate, you need some enchantment hate to deal with it. Other than that, though, it's a pretty solid card. That's some serious card advantage right there. In the number 6 spot, we've got Brain Maggot. I love how Wizards can kind of reprint cards that are pretty similar to cards they did in the past, but kind of different. This is like a Tidehollow Sculler, except it doesn't require white mana, its body isn't as great, and it's also an enchantment creature. So it doesn't die to artifact hate, but there's a lot of enchantment hate out there. There's a lot of enchantment hate in the new set, too, and being able to turn 1 Thoughtseize, turn 2 Brain Maggot is potentially I'm not going to say potentially game-winning. That sounds a little bit odd. It doesn't make sense. But it can seriously cripple you, especially if you've taken a mulligan down to 5. Turn 1 Thoughtseize, turn 2 Brain Maggot would kind of screw you over at that point. Anyways, number 5, we've got another card that's been talked about a bit. It tends to be more the mythics and rares that do, but Godsend. Basically, I like Godsend because it's great in control decks. You can destroy creature strategies with this card just by throwing it on one of Heliod's cleric tokens. You can all of a sudden make some really profitable blocks. You can swing in for more damage. You can get rid of pesky creatures. You can exile god creatures if you happen to block them and they're attacking. Very powerful. Protects them from casting the same cards with the same name as the cards exiled with Godsend, as long as it remains in play, of course. So if they have some quick artifact hate, they can take care of that, like a Vandal Blast or something. I also like that it's not an enchantment artifact. This means that it's not affected by all the new artifact removal that was printed in the set to help deal with all those enchantment creatures running all over the place. I don't foresee it being played in aggro decks. I see maybe control decks, but it's still a neat card. In the number 4 spot, we've got a common. We've got Bloodcrazed Hoplite. I like this card. It's a 2/1 for 2 that does very good things against heroic decks. Decks like Heroic Red and Blue-White Heroic with humans. Decks like that, Bloodcrazed Hoplite tends to neuter them a little bit. I foresee it playing more as a sideboard card to counter those styles of decks, especially in the mono-black control and devotion decks. But even if you decide you want to splash black in a heroic deck or something, this guy could be absolutely insane. He can become monstrous pretty quick. He's also a common, which is another great thing. So while his effect isn't that game-breaking, Wizards also makes him fairly easy to acquire, which may influence the decline of those heroic decks because of this guy, although it probably won't. In the number 3 spot, we've got a really cool card. We've got Battlefield Thaumaturge. It's like Wizards wanted us to abuse this card elsewhere. Check out this article for a whole host of ways to abuse Battlefield Thaumaturge, and if you do not feel like pausing the video and writing that down, you can probably just Google Gavin Verhey Battlefield Thaumaturge, and you'll find the article. It's pretty good. I recommend you read it. You can abuse this guy. Basically, Comet Storm now becomes a giant, what's it called? It's like that miracle with the red Bonfire. That's it, Bonfire the Damned. Comet Storm becomes Bonfire the Damned from hand at instant speed for less mana, which is pretty good with this guy. Multiple Thaumaturges allow for multiple thingies. It's really, really tough to explain, so I totally recommend you check out that article. Also, he's hexproof in a pinch, which helps him dodge removal and such, and he will probably be a target for a lot of removal. In the number 2 spot, we have the god on the list. This is Iroas, God of Victory. For me, it was a really tough choice. I like Aetherios, and I like Iroas, and I like Kruphix, and I like Keranos. I eventually went, kind of slashed out Kruphix and Keranos because while they're powerful, their CMC is pretty high, and I don't think they'll see that much play, at least in Standard. Whereas Iroas and Aetherios have really good abilities straight up without being the creatures, and when they are creatures, they become even more powerful. If this guy is a general in a Boros aggro deck, you can pretty much expect to win a very, very good portion of aggro matches with that ability. Your opponents can't make profitable blocks, and it's harder for them to make blocks at all with this guy in play. Basically, every single creature gets a madcap skills. Very, very powerful. Plus, he's like a giant half-bull, like hugging all the aggro players out there. Super cool, and that 7 power does really, really great things in Commander. With the 21 general damage rule, the difference between 6 and 7 power and 4 general attacks winning the game as opposed to 3 is really, really immense, especially when you get abilities like Iroas, which makes cards harder to block. Super powerful. I absolutely love it. I love the flavor of it. Super cool. In the number 1 spot, what's the only thing ranked higher than the god? Deicide. The thing that permanently deals with gods. I mean, it screws the mono-blue devotion decks that are relying on Thassa to draw them cards completely. If they can't draw as many cards with Thassa, or maybe that's that's Biden of Thassa I'm thinking of. Anyways, but it does deal with Thassa, which is a good source of their win con. It even is instant speed, exile target enchantment, which is pretty good. It's not as relevant in EDH, because it just goes back to the command zone, the god does. But basically, yeah, Deicide. It's instant speed enchantment hate that deals with gods. I see it possibly even making its way into sideboards in Modern, where gods have become a little bit of a fixture, especially among enchantment-style decks. Sometimes, I'm not sure about this, but new Enduring Ideal decks may run a copy of Heliod, just so they can do something with their mana on their turn. And start, producing creatures to chump block if it becomes necessary, perhaps if they don't have Phyrexian on life or something. But either way, this card is pretty powerful. I really like Deicide. I think it is going to have an effect on the way games are played. Does he have the Deicide or does he not? If he does, I'm not going to play God X, Y, or Z this turn. I'm going to, I don't know, play a Bloodcrazed Hoplite instead, something like that. But anyways, Deicide is pretty powerful. I'm a fan of it. That's basically it for this list. I want to know what you guys think. Post those comments. Suggest those top 10 lists. I would definitely like to see more list requests. Okay? I have had, I believe, a whopping 0 thus far. And while I may be good just rolling out of my own brain for a little while here, I would definitely like list suggestions so that this could, possibly become a feature that lasts for longer than just a couple months as soon as my brain runs out of ideas for things to do. And please be nice to each other in the comments. Don't bash each other on whether one standard strategy is going to be more affected by another. I would like to keep this peaceful. So thank you for watching. Give it a like if you enjoyed it. Hope to see you guys again soon.